your mind.
Hello, good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And you have myself, Stephen George. A very good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 16th of March 2014 and we have a busy show. We have a lot of things to talk about, so we'll crack on and find out what the communication channels are, Steve.
Okay, communication channels please, Mary.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Thanks very much, Mary. 046 927 1212 is the magic number. If you're going to ring in from the outside of Republic of Ireland, it's 00353 46927 1212, and we're going to be monitoring the chat room as well. If you want to navigate your way to the chat room, it's oymradio.com, and on the left hand side you will see the live chat button. You can click there and log in with your real name or a makey-uppy one, and I'd like to say hello to everyone that's already in there. We're also going to be monitoring the People's Internet Radio chat room as well. So salutations to all of you over there. Alan.
And just a question on the chat room already. Who's on tonight? Well, we're just going to announce that now. We have Dr. George Carlo, who's a world-recognised medical scientist. We're going to be talking about the dangers of wireless technology and everything that's tied into that. You know, this is kind of one of our pet subjects, myself and Steve, because we're kind of big into it, and we've had a number of guests on the show talking about the dangers of wireless technology. So again, you know, we have another doctor on to talk about what's going on, and some good news, may I add, about exposing the dangers of wireless technology, which is what Dr. George is going to talk to us about. But before we do that, as usual, we have a few things to go through, things that just happened during the week. And the first one, we'd just like to give a big shout out to Mick at Liffey Sound FM in Lucan Community Radio. You know what? I'm going to have to put my teeth in.
Put someone else's teeth in. Yours are giving you trouble.
There will be a time when I'll be doing that, I'll tell you.
There will be.
Mick is doing a great job down there, and he's spreading the word and getting it out there. So if you haven't heard of Mick's show, it's, I believe it's called
The World You Don't Know.
The World You Don't Know on liffeysoundfm.ie. It's every Monday night from 9 to 10. And you can text Mick in any questions that you have when he's live. So you can go over to the website and check it all out. But fair play to Mick. He's doing a great job. I was listening to the show last Monday, and he was having a good chat and talking about a good few things there. So well done, Mick. Keep up the good work. And we will get him back up here to the studio, and we'll do a co-hosting with him again. We'll give him a shout. I know he's a bit busy at the moment. He has a house full of kids, and he's very busy. So we'll get him up when
he needs to get away from the house.
He needs to get a break. He needs to come up for a cappuccino, and you know, in the studio we give him a cappuccino, and he can sit down and he can do some co-hosting with us. Okay, now we heard it last week, didn't we? We did hear it. John, who phoned in, thanks John for phoning in last week, and he told us about a chap called Dr. Courtney Brown, who was a remote viewer in the military, and he had a countdown on his website, and the countdown was for up to Saturday the 15th, which is yesterday. Now, did anything happen? Nope.
No, hang on a sec. Something did happen, and I think you're going to tell us, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Okay, something did happen. Basically, he put a video up on the website, and then at the end of it, he said, hey, if you want to know more, buy my DVD and buy my book.
Yeah, the gas thing is, the funny thing is, I think both Alan and I are psychic, because we were discussing this during the week as to what the hell's going to happen when it reaches Saturday. I think when we checked it last week, it said 6 days or 6 days to go, whatever it was. So during the week, we were kind of shooting the breeze, and we said, wouldn't it be funny if, when it got to Saturday, all it was an advertisement for a book or a DVD, and we had a laugh, and that's exactly what happened. We're psychic.
Yeah,
yes.
Definitely. We can kind of had a good laugh and a good guess that that's what it would be. And I'm not too sure. I mean, if you watch the video on the website, he talks about this massive disclosure, and talking about a pyramid, the pyramid that's in Giza, is not really a big disclosure as far as I'm concerned, and that's just my own personal opinion. To other people it might be, but to me, there's so many other things that are going on in the world that need to be exposed. Talking about a pyramid via remote viewing is not really a big deal.
Because you holiday there every year, don't you?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
No, that's Carlo, not Cairo.
Oh, County Carlo. That's County Carlo in Ireland here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Carlo. Okay, you're going to tell us something, aren't you?
Yes, I'm going to tell you something. Yeah, during the week we received an email from a group based in Northern Ireland, and they're called Anon Wolf TV. And the website is www.anonwolftv.co.uk. I see they're actually already joining us on the chat room this evening, so I'll say a big hello to you. They all sent over some very interesting photographs. I'll have to put someone else's teeth in as well. Some photographs of chemtrails. To see them, you'll need to log into the OYM site and go to the chemtrail gallery and look for the ones marked Liverpool. Anyway, Anon Wolf TV is primarily based in Northern Ireland, and their main aim is to target people in the UK and Ireland who are not paying attention to what is happening around them. They want to help people make the connection between global events and how these events have an effect on our everyday lives and our local community. They want to motivate people to dig deeper themselves and to start paying attention to what's happening in their own town or city. As well as covering global events, the Anon Wolf TV team will be publishing their own first-hand account reports and articles over the coming months. They have also set up a forum, which is anonwolftv.co.uk/forum. I'm sure you can get to that from the website anyway. And they warmly welcome any like-minded people to come and start some discussions. They're interested in inviting people who have a particular expertise in an area to contribute to the site on a regular basis. So if any of you, I'll try that again. So if any of the OYM radio listeners think that there's something that they would like to talk about or to do, get in touch using the contact page on the site. Again, that's anonwolftv.co.uk. You can also find them on Facebook and Twitter, and they're also on YouTube. Their YouTube channel is Anon Wolf TV. So yeah, obviously like-minded people. You can check out the website if you like what you see, and if you're interested, I'm sure there's a place for you on the forum. Maybe if you join up and submit an article or submit your story, then maybe you might become famous.
There you go. Now, Anon are on the chat facility at the moment, and so if you have any questions, you can ask them. We don't have an affiliation with Anon, by the way. We just said we'd give them a bit of a plug, just to let you know that there's no affiliation there. But we were happy to give them a plug and let them do what they need to do. Now, the last thing on the list is, I'm sure some of you have seen it. If not, check it out on YouTube. We'll send you out the link. Ben Gilroy's TV show.
Yes.
Irish Independent Network, OYM. And it was the pilot shows, the first show that Ben was doing. Fair play to him. He did a brilliant job. Good information. John Wilson, the whistleblower, the Garda whistleblower, was on. Plus Van de Man and the other chap from Direct Democracy was on doing an interview. And brilliant. I'd have to say, I hope Ben does more, gets more guests on and get the information out there. That's what we need. We need an independent TV network away from the mainstream, away from the control. So well done, Ben, and everybody else involved. Well done for getting that on the air. And I hope to see a lot more guests coming on.
Yeah, of course. What we were just saying today, Alan and I were having a conversation. And we were just saying, well, God, Ben's kind of he's making it big now. He's got his own TV channel, and we both checked out the interview last night. I haven't seen it all. I know Alan has, but Ben was there, suited and booted, and Raymond Whitehead and the other chap there, Mr. as Alan referred to him as Van de Man because I can't pronounce his name either. But they were all kind of there with their suits and their shorts and ties, and we were laughing, saying that if they invited us on, because most of the time Alan and I go around kind of jeans and t-shirts. We're that kind of people, jeans and t-shirts, and we'd either have to rent a suit to go on to the show if we ever got the invite, or else if we just went on as we are, we'd let the tone down. So
we'd bring the tone down.
we would.
I think they'd probably have a bouncer at the studio anyway, saying, "Sorry, you can't get in. You have jeans on."
Not tonight, lads. You're not on the list. We ever heard that before?
Exactly. How's your week?
My week's full of the usual mix of fun and frolics. And actually, I've only got one thing to mention, because this is the highlight of my week. I couldn't believe it, because anyone who knows me, away from OYM, any of my, say, friends or family, they know sometimes I'll have some information and I'll share that information. It's got to the stage where I share the information with everyone. You know, whether it's talking about fluoride or talking about Wi-Fi or whatever, I share the information. Years ago, I used to share the information and I overdone it, and then people kind of, I didn't get a good response, so I used to, for a time then, I stopped sharing, and I couldn't understand why people weren't interested in what I was saying, you know, about, say, fluoridation or whatever. But this week, there was a debate. Now, I haven't actually seen it myself, but my mother, who's also open-minded, she's I won't say she's an elderly lady, but she's in her 60s, very early 60s, and she's become open-minded, and she actually listens to the show. I'm not sure if she's tuned in tonight. She may or she may not be, but I'll say hi, Mom, anyway. But she watched the debate on the fluoridation issue. It was on primetime TV here in Ireland during the week. She rang me yesterday, was telling me about this debate. Of course, I hadn't seen it, so I suggested, was it all kind of one-sided with the pro-fluoride camp pushing their agenda? And she said no. She said she was surprised that it was a very well balanced debate, and she said she learned lots out of it, and a lot of the information that they were sharing on the show was kind of anti-water fluoridation, because they were saying that it has been banned or rejected in other European countries. So yeah, that's kind of what happened during the week with that show. There was talk about it then in I think one of the local papers, the Independent, I believe. I was made aware of this when I went into work, and one of the ladies in work mentioned to me. She said there was something in the paper about water fluoridation and some debate. Did you hear anything about that? And I said no, I haven't heard anything about it. And then that was it. I said no more, and a couple of minutes later, this was during lunch break, she said to me, so what's the story with this fluoridation? It's amazing, because I go in, I tell them the information, and I share it with them, but no one is interested. But as soon as it hits the mainstream, now their ears kind of prick up. Now they want to know the information. I guarantee it'll be the same with the Wi-Fi, because I've been telling them about the dangers of the Wi-Fi, and no, they don't care. They're in the office, they're sitting right next to the router, the Wi-Fi router. But it won't be until that hits mainstream when they'll start taking an interest.
Well, you know the psychology. If it's on TV, whether it's true or not, they'll believe it.
Absolutely,
if it's not on TV and it is true, they won't believe it.
Yeah.
They have to wait till it's in the papers, in the mainstream, on TV, and then they'll believe it.
Yeah. But anyway, she asked me then about the floor. What did I know about it? You know, she actually wanted to know more information based on, because it was in mainstream. So I shared some information with her as to exactly what it was, how it came about, why it's in the water, and where it actually comes from, and how it's, how it ends up in the water supply. I wasn't too long. I'd say I spoke for about 5 minutes, and by the time I was finished, I was half expecting, the usual. Yeah, but look, if it was bad for us, they wouldn't pour it in the water. I didn't get that at all. When I was finished speaking, she just looked at me and she just kind of, she shook her head in dismay, and she said, I don't believe it. But not in that real, yeah. I don't believe it. It was kind of, I don't believe that this has been happened and it's been done unto us, and
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's
our government lied.
Our government, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was the highlight of my week. So that's all I'm gonna mention. How was your week?
Well,
where do you start?
Where do I start? Good God. Okay, let's start off with a quick joke. Okay.
I love jokes.
It's not really a joke, but it's a kind of a joke. Okay. Here you go.
Sorry. When is a joke not a joke?
Go on.
When Alan tells it.
When Alan tells it. Okay, there you go. Good one. How do you know when the person has no knowledge of politics?
I give up. How do you know when a person has no knowledge of politics?
They vote for one of the mainstream parties.
Very, very good.
Right, okay?
Okay.
That's how you know. And I'll tell you why, because I'm not going to mention any names, but I happened to speak to somebody who had a sticker of one of these representatives of one of these mainstream parties. And she said he was from Fianna Fáil, and I went, okay. And she said, but he's a nice man.
Well, I'm sure he is a nice man. Yeah.
I'm sure he is a nice man. But apart from the country being in a state the way it is, and partially caused by Fianna Fáil in the first place, voting for somebody because they're a nice man and not the state of the country is a bit misguided, as far as I'm concerned. That's my own opinion. So anyway, so that's why I kind of say that, because if the person wanted to go into detail, I'd have to say, well, do you understand what representative democracy is? Do you understand what the party whip system is? And that you'd probably lose them completely. But because he's a nice man and maybe he fixed some kind of path outside the house, she'll probably vote for him.
Yeah, the usual.
So, the usual stuff. Okay, the other thing is, I do feel, again, I've been kind of deep thinking this week, doing a lot of thinking. I do feel that apathy is a very big contributor of ignorance. Now, that's more of a subjective comment, as I've no objective research to confirm that. It's just my own personal opinion, and what I feel that apathy is a big contributor of ignorance, because if you're not bothered, you won't go off and kind of check it out. And the reason why I say that is because it's been a sheeple week. It's been a very, very, very sheeple week. And again, people stuck in belief systems, not questioning their belief system, and forming their opinions based on their belief system. And it was just, that's all I'll say. It was a sheeple week. And we've all been there. We've all spoken to people who have been conditioned, and they see the world in a certain light, and you try and educate them, or you try and talk to them about it, and that's just the way they see it. So, some people are probably meant to wake up, and some people are never meant to wake up, and that's just the way it is. So, what can you do? You just carry on, and you just wake the people up that want to be woke up or want to know about it, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help people. That's all. We have a moral conscience that drives us to help people. Myself and Steve don't get paid. We don't get any money. We have our own families and things to do, and we've a lot of stuff to do outside the studio, but we feel morally obliged, and we have a moral conscience to do what we do, to do this radio show, because we know what's going on. We feel we have a good finger on the pulse of what's going on, as a lot of people have when they wake up, of what's going on in the world. And unfortunately, the sheeple don't get it, and they just think that we're mad, maybe conspiracy theorists, maybe nutters, maybe whatever. And what they don't realise is we're trying to make a difference for them as well, not just for us, for them and their families and their kids. And that's the disheartening part in it, is that what we're trying to do is help, and they don't get it. They don't get it. They're just in their own mind. But look, we soldier on. We'll do what we can and carry on, and maybe one day they'll get it. They'll get the picture. They'll take the time to look at the information and not just throw it to one side. Because when you challenge somebody's belief system, that's when you know they're not open-minded. People say they're open-minded, but when you challenge their belief system, they close down straight away. You know they're not. And that's the trouble that we all have, trying to wake people up. But that's just the way it is. And what we're going to try and do is, and the one thing we try and do is, like what we're going to do tonight, is we're going to bring an expert on the subject matter and talk about it, because we don't know everything. We know a little bit, but we don't know everything. But we bring experts on the show for you to listen to and, make up your own opinion. You don't even have to agree with what we say or what the expert says. You make up your own opinion. But at least knowledge gives you choice and ignorance doesn't. Okay, so we try and give you the knowledge, and then you choose yourself what you want to believe and what you don't to believe. It's simple as that. Okay, without further ado, we're going to bring the guest on. Our guest tonight is Dr. George Carlo. He's a world-renowned medical scientist and an expert in wireless technology, and he has good news, which is great to hear. We had a quick chat with him before the show. So good evening, Dr. George. How are you doing?
Hey, good evening, Alan. Steve, you too. Hello.
Thanks. Very good evening, George.
Dr. George, thank you for coming on the show. It's much appreciated. This, as I said earlier on, just as we started, this is a kind of personal interest for myself and Steve for a lot of reasons, from a communications point of view, and the whole wireless technology. And we've been down the road trying to educate the mums and dads and the schools regarding the technology and the dangers of it and everything else. And you just get the blank look, and you just say, well, the government said it's safe. And this is what you get. So what we're going to do is we're going to get into it, and we're going to talk about it. But the first thing we'll do, Dr. George, is let's talk about yourself, your background, and the stuff that you've been covering, and what you've been doing, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, this question about wireless technology health effects is now some 20 years old.
And wireless technology began to be used in civilian applications in the middle 1980s. And in the early 90s, there were some questions raised publicly about whether or not cell phones at the time, which were the predominant type of wireless technology back in those days, could be associated with brain cancer, brain tumors. And there were questions raised publicly. And in the United States, there were congressional hearings. And those congressional hearings made clear that cell phones, both in the United States and in Europe and around the world, had not gone through proper pre-market testing. In other words, they were devices that released a type of electromagnetic radiation, but they had not been tested for safety before they were put into commerce. Now, the reason they were not tested for safety was because the industry and the government had reason to believe, based on science in the early 1980s, that the only way that electromagnetic fields could cause health effects was through the mechanism of heating, which is what happens with a microwave oven, for example. And because cell phones at the time, mobile phones at the time, were transmitting using very low power, there was wide acceptance that there would not be heating of tissue. Therefore, there could not be any health effects. So cell phones got put into commerce without safety testing. Now, when these questions about health effects were raised in 1992 and 1993, it became clear that, number one, they had not been tested for safety, and number two, there were now serious questions about safety. So what happened in the United States was that the Food and Drug Administration, along with other government agencies, made a deal of sorts with the wireless industry. They said, you folks put money into filling in the data gaps that are there because you didn't do the proper testing a decade ago, and we will oversee that work. So what happened was a fund of $28.5 million was collected over a period of several years from the wireless industry. We were asked, my group in Washington was asked to oversee that research and to actually conduct the necessary studies. And the government's job was to peer review and oversee the work. And this work was called the WTR, the Wireless Technology Research Group. And it remains the largest and most well-funded effort looking at the health effects of wireless technology conducted anywhere in the world, even to today. And at the time, when I took on that project, we were basing our science on the existing scientific literature that was in the open scientific literature, not what the military had, because the military for many, many years had been doing research in this area, but that information was classified. So we based our work only on what was in the public domain. We developed a research agenda, and over a period of 7 years, from 1993 through 1999, we conducted some 56 studies looking at the health effects of wireless technology, not only cell phones, but also other types of technologies, similar to what we now have in the consumer, user space, including things like Wi-Fi and base stations and, smart meters and those things. So we tried to look at everything. And what we found was a surprise to us and a surprise to the government and the industry. What we found was that the type of signals that were coming from wireless technology were signals that do not exist in nature. Now, not to get too much into the physics and the complicated science, but suffice to say that electromagnetic fields are part of the energy matrix that we live in every day. Gravity is a type of electromagnetic field. Visible light is a type of electromagnetic field. Sound is a type of electromagnetic field. So that over time, living things, human beings as well as animals and, plant life and whatever, have adapted over the years to types of electromagnetic fields. And it takes a long time for the adaptation to occur. Now, it turns out that with wireless communication, the combination of electromagnetic fields, primary carrier waves, which are in the, maybe 1800 megahertz range of frequency, and secondary waves that are the result of modulations on those carrier waves, the concurrence of those two different types of electromagnetic fields does not occur in nature. And what happened is that living tissue was not able to adapt to it. So that we found a number of problems that we did not expect. We found genetic damage in human blood. We found increases in the risk of tumors. We found things like leakage in the blood-brain barrier, which is a protection of brain tissue from dangerous chemicals that might be circulating in blood. We found immune response compromises, a whole host of different symptoms that were the result of the body not being able to adapt to this new type of exposure, this electromagnetic field exposure. And when we, in 1999, finished that research effort, our recommendation was that there should be warnings. Was that we did not have all the answers, but we certainly had some surprises there. And we felt that it was important to let consumers know that while we're sorting this out from a scientific point of view, that people should be able to take whatever precautions they felt were necessary to protect themselves and their families. Now, as you might imagine, the wireless industry, and not only in the United States, but also in Europe and in Canada, had funded this work. And their thinking was that, well, these guys did this work, we paid for it, and we should have some control about how these conclusions are communicated. So that when we had these results and made these recommendations, the industry was not happy with them, because what we were doing at that time, now if you think historically, and I guess this is worth a little bit of a discussion, back in 1993, there might have been worldwide 15 to 20 million people using cell phones back in the early 1990s. By the time we came with our findings in 1999, worldwide there were about 100 million people using mobile phones or cell phones. Today, there are upwards of 6 billion people using wireless technology. And what was interesting was that when we went from 15 million people in 1993 to 100 million people in 1999, that was enough for the industry to do whatever they could to kill the messenger.
Yeah.
So there was a very, very huge fight, if you will, between us scientists. We had more than 200 scientists from around the world working on this program. And we found problems, and we said there need to be warnings. But the industry felt that even jeopardizing a business where there are 100 million people, it was enough to distance themselves and try to discredit the work that we had done, which they tried to do, and they have continued to try to do that for the past decade. So when you think about 100 million users being enough to trigger an all-out industry response to try to, suppress the information, just imagine the political pressure now when you have over 6 billion people using these devices around the world. So anyway, that's sort of the history of the science through the 90s and into the early part of the 2000s. Unfortunately, since then, there have not been very objective or independent scientific studies to carry on the work that we did in the 1990s. The main reason is that the industry has, if you will, cornered the market in terms of scientific research. They fund the type of research that they would like to fund, most of that showing that there are no health effects from wireless technology. And those who are independent, which are few and far between, there's a good group over in Sweden, and there are a couple of groups here in the United States who still can do independent work, but there isn't enough money really to fund research that can compete with the hundreds of millions of dollars each year that the industry uses to create this illusionary database that suggests that there are no dangers from wireless technologies. To be sure, there are dangers. The good news is that there are some things that we can do to try to mitigate, but it is very, very confusing to the public. As you folks were talking about in your opening, sometimes people believe that, the government is on top of all this stuff. And if there was a danger, the government would not let this be out in commerce. If cell phones were dangerous, they would not be out there. If Wi-Fi were dangerous, it would not be out there. Unfortunately, that is a misperception, and many, many people in the Western world believe that misperception. And that's one of the challenges. That's why a lot of times, parents who have kids in schools where they're bringing in Wi-Fi, the argument is made that, you need Wi-Fi to make sure that your kids don't fall behind what other kids in other countries and other parts of your country are learning, so that they make the argument that your kids need Wi-Fi in school to have a good education. And when the questions about safety are raised, those parents are already, they're already hoodwinked, if you will, thinking that they need this for the benefit of their children. And they're vested against the argument that there might be dangers, even though there are alternatives to Wi-Fi in school that actually are better in terms of information exchange and the benefits that people talk about. But there's so much confusion and so much misinformation. And as you were stating, Alan, sometimes people don't want to be woken up maybe. But there's another thing, is that sometimes there's so much information and it's so conflicting that people throw their hands up in the air and they say, we don't know what that means. Let me rely on the experts in government.
Yeah. Well, here's where we're at, Dr. George. We had just before we went live, as I mentioned to you, we did a quick interview with Barry Trower regarding the Dr. Michael Rapiccioli, who was the chairperson for the expert group which the World Health Organization used to actually verify that wireless technology is safe. So he put this report together. The World Health Organization sent the report around to these countries saying that it's safe, which is what the Irish government rely on. And we subsequently found out, the World Health Organization subsequently found out that Dr. Michael Rapiccioli was actually double jobbing, and he was working as a consultant, allegedly, for the communications industry, and they ended up sacking him. But it was too late. The horses bolted. The report went out. So instead of the World Health Organization having an egg on their face, they obviously wanted to take the deniability approach. Now, as I said, John Weigel, who we've had on the show, has a copy which Barry gave him of this top secret report, which we're hoping to get our hands on, and we'll put up side by side with Barry Trower's report. Now, what we have here in Ireland at the moment, and now I've said this to parents about what happened and the double jobbing and everything else, and it's just complete shock and disbelief. Now, over here in Ireland, we have recently, our Irish government has signed a communications contract with the 4G networks, and they've received €850 million for licenses so they can roll out 4G. Now, obviously, the wireless technology, as we all know, is so integrated into society in every way possible that to turn around for the government, any government, to turn around and say, yes, we found out that it's dangerous, like thalidomide or like asbestos. If they turned around, the litigation alone, the lawsuits alone would cripple the country, and the government would be, well, there wouldn't be any money left. So it's deniability all the way. I mean, there's no other way they can do it. They have to deny it. And what they'll do is they go in for the 4 or 5 years into government, and they'll pass it on to the next guy. And that's basically what's happening. And if you contact the Irish government, which is what I've done, because I wanted to know why the schools, when you say wireless is dangerous, and they said, oh, the education department said that it's safe. So I went straight to the top, and I asked our environment minister, which is a minister called Phil Hogan, and I said, give me the information that you rely on that says Wi-Fi is safe. And they sent me a link to the World Health Organization report, which is, I think it's a 14 or 17 page report, and it's 7 years out of date. It's 7 years old. Technology has moved on in 7 years. So even though we have people like yourself coming on the show, and as I said, Barry Trower, and a number of other guests who know about this area and are experts in the area, there's still a disbelief. There's still, oh well, our government wouldn't lie. They wouldn't let this happen. If it wasn't safe, they tell us. And well, I don't know what you do, Dr. George. What do you do with people who just don't believe?
Well, see, here's a thing that might be helping. And by the way, this is exactly why shows like yours, who are trying to educate and empower consumers and parents and others to make their own decisions, are so critical, because the institutions are compromised by the politics of power and money. And this isn't anything new. This has been going on for hundreds of years. And in this particular case, there is tremendous confusion about the difference between the truth with regard to the health effects and the politics with regard to what governments are compelled to do under their constitutions and regulatory authorities. And here's how it breaks out. In the scientific arena, what our job is to find the truth. That's what science is, a pursuit of truth. And we do our best to know and learn as much as we can and then make informed judgments about safety. That's what this is all about. And when we look at the science alone, there is no question that wireless technology with the overlays of carrier waves and overlays of modulation is too much for our bodies, the cells in our bodies, the tissues in our bodies, the organs in our bodies. It's too much for them to rapidly adapt to. There are serious health risks. There's no question about that. Young kids, young children are more vulnerable. So that from a scientific point of view, there are no questions about the dangers. Okay. However, decision makers in government are not bound by truth. They are bound by justice or fairness. And whatever the regulatory rules are that the legislatures and the executives in government impose upon them, so that truth is one thing and the fairness is something else. And what happens is that the integration of something like wireless technology into virtually everything we do in life now, into virtually everything we do in life, whether it's business, whether it's education, whether it's security, whether it is banking, everything is tied now into this wireless communication infrastructure. So that when you make a change, because we're trying to protect kids in school, and if it impacts the economy, now a fairness comparison comes into play. And whether or not it's because they are limited by what they are allowed to do legally, or if they simply do not have the spine and the guts to stand up for safety or what they believe, there are many reasons why we don't have the proper, types of regulations for safety. But the fact is, That's the world that we're living in now. Wireless technology infrastructure has overtaken everything. And for example, here in the United States, when we talk about the dangers of Wi-Fi, we talk about the dangers of smart meters, we talk about the dangers of towers, phones, all of those things, we can't get anywhere within the government structure because of concerns for homeland security, first responders. Ambulances now have wireless signals that give pictures back to hospitals so that you can save lives quicker. You have all of that now that goes into the fairness equation. And the truth has become a stepchild. And that is one of the biggest challenges that we have to face. So we really have to empower individual people with enough knowledge. We can't overwhelm them with knowledge, but with enough knowledge so they can make informed judgments about their own safety and the safety of their children. And that's really the only pathway we have.
Yeah, we have to, well, again, get the information out there. Now, there was a very good question from one of the mums, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I couldn't really answer it. But she said to me, we know that people who use mobile phones and certain technologies over a long period of time end up getting the likes of skin cancers and tumours and, all sorts of ailments. And she said to me, how do you know that them ailments were caused by the technology? And I said, well, I'm not a medical doctor, I don't know, but I'm sure there's a way medically that they can say that tumour or that cancer or that skin cancer, whatever, was caused by X, Y, and Z. I mean, is this something that you can verify?
Well, it's a lot more difficult than you might think, and the reason is because there are many causes of all diseases. In the old days, like you mentioned earlier in the show, you mentioned asbestos. Asbestos is an exception to the rule because asbestos exposure will cause a couple of different things, mesothelioma, which is the cancer, or else asbestosis, which is cysting in the lungs. So it's a unique exposure with unique effects. But most other exposures are not like that. And the type of thing that we're seeing with electromagnetic fields is a fundamental change in the way individual cell membranes react to the environment that they're in. So that we're talking about altering how individual cells behave. And if it's a nerve cell that we're altering, we'll have something go haywire in the nervous system. If it's a GI tract cell that we're altering, we'll have something go haywire in the GI tract. So that you have many different organs and organ systems involved because the damage is a fundamental change in how cells behave. Our science has not caught up to be able to look at a fundamental physiologic change that causes a whole different array of conditions. We haven't caught up to that. For example, in the field of epidemiology, which is the study of human disease, a great deal of the studies begin with a disease and then look backwards at exposures. Now, if we have an exposure, like exposure to a wireless signal, that could cause 100 different diseases, depending on the weaknesses of the individual person or on the cells that are affected, starting with the disease and looking backwards, no way can it get to the full breadth of what the problem might be. So this question of proving cause and effect is one that is very, very difficult, and it is one that the industry uses to hoodwink the public. They say there is no proof, there is no mechanism that can prove definitively that this exposure would lead to this type of cancer. Now, that's on the scientific argument point of view, but there is something that has gone on in the United States that is a real game changer, and we're going to know about this within the next couple of months. Back in 2001, 2002, there were a number of lawsuits that were brought by people who had brain tumors, and they were claiming that the brain tumors were caused by their cell phones. Now, of course, when these lawsuits were first brought, the industry, with the power of many lawyers, tried to push these lawsuits back and have them dismissed. Well, it turned out that they were not able to do that. And these lawsuits, of which there were a couple dozen at the beginning, they made it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court in 2005. And in 2006, they were sent back to the states for those lawsuits to go forward. Now, there are a couple of things that are important about this. If there was only smoke and not science that would say, hey, there's some fire in there somewhere, there's something to this claim that cell phones are causing brain tumors. If it was only smoke, the industry, with their hundreds of millions of dollars in lawyers, would have been able to push these back. And they were not able to do that. So that gives you at least an overarching, message that there's something here. Now, those cases over the past 2 or 3 years have been consolidated in a courtroom in the District of Columbia, in D.C. Superior Court. And last December, the court pulled in experts, plaintiff experts, people who are saying that there are dangers, and defendant experts, the people who are paid by the industry to say there's nothing going on, into the courtroom, and they held a month of hearings, testimony, in December and January. And those scientists and doctors were put under oath. Now, what that means in our system here in the United States is that if you lie, you can go to jail because you'll be in contempt of court. So this is really the first time in some 20 years that some of the top scientists in the world have actually been put under oath. And the question that they were asked to answer was, is there adequate science to decide this question of cause and effect? And in listening to the testimony and in listening to the pushback, the cross-examination, it became very clear that all of the scientists agree, whether they're on the one side or the other, that there are definitely biological effects. There are definitely adverse effects from the exposure. There were very, very impressive arguments made about mechanisms that could lead to the harm. So right now, in this court setting, with this testimony under oath, those reports are being put together, and I believe that at the end of March, they're going to be both sides are giving their reports to the judge, and the judge is going to make a decision about whether or not these cases, which I think there are some 15 or 18 of them now, should go forward. This is a multi-billion-dollar litigation, one of the biggest pieces of litigation that has ever occurred in the world, I believe. And the fundamental question about cause and effect is being addressed. Now, my personal view, and it's only my personal view, I was not one of the testifying experts, not involved, but by observing what went on, it looks to me like the smart money says that yes, there is adequate science to show problems here, and that these cases are going to go forward. If that is the conclusion, it's a game changer all around the world, because in the legal system, it is taking truth and applying it to the question of justice or fairness. This has never really been put to that test before, and my expectation is that if it turns out the way I think it should turn out, you're going to have all around the world ramifications that now are acknowledging for the first time that there are absolute health effects that come from wireless technology.
That's going to be something. That's going to be a bombshell. And we have so much integration with wireless technology and wireless systems globally. You obviously have the number one issue of if they find in favor of the fact that cause and effect that wireless technology is dangerous, which we know it is, but if they find it legally, then the ramifications globally and of government saying, I mean, if governments turn around and plead ignorance, is that what they're going to do? They're going to say, well, we're just doing what we're told? Is that how they're going to get out of it?
Well, I think that that's what the governments are going to do. They're going to say, look, within the restrictions of how we have to operate, this is, we made the best judgments that we could. Now, we know that the deck, has been stacked, but it's this plausible deniability that they are going to stand behind. That's the government agencies. Now, the industry is going to be in a real jam because most of the science that underscores the dangers, most of the science comes from the 90s because there has not been a lot of new science funded independently. So most of the science comes from the 90s. So now you have the question, you knew and you did not warn.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a much bigger problem for the industry. Now, you had alluded earlier to, how all of this integration, has made the industry pretty much untouchable in Europe and in the United States. And, this too big to fail argument is a serious situation because if you look at, for example, it's not only that people are vested in using wireless technology, that in the United States, for example, some 35 to 40% of retirement funds are invested in wireless technology stocks. So that if something happens to the wireless industry in the United States, you have, millions of senior citizens whose pensions will be impacted by a downturn in the value of wireless communication stocks, for example. So what this says is that the industry will probably go to the government for a bailout because they have to protect the population, especially those people who are, retired and are going to rely on their retirement income to sustain them for the rest of their lives, however many years that might be.
Well, that leads to the fact that means that's what the banks did. They went to the government and the taxpayer had to bail them out.
Yes, that's exactly the pattern. We had the same thing with the auto industry here a few years ago in the United States as well. So with the banks, the auto industry. So when you have industries that become too big to fail, that's a strategy now of industry. And it is a strategy of the wireless technology industry. Interestingly, the fellow back in 1992, 1993, when I first came into the job of running the research program that was overseen by the government, the fellow who ran the trade association for the wireless industry in the United States, a fellow by the name of Tom Wheeler, who by the time we finished with the research, Tom Wheeler and I were having very, very bold and aggressive public arguments on television shows and everywhere else. He now is the head of the Federal Communications Commission here in the U.S. So he is in charge of the regulatory agency that is the watchdog. And he believes that there is absolutely nothing wrong with the technology.
See, that's wrong. That's the same thing with your FDA. The cronies are put in place, and all of a sudden all these chemicals and drugs are passed, like aspartame, and the population get affected by it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a level of corporatocracy, which you guys in the States suffer from, all the lobbying of the private companies and the corporate companies, and we're no different over here. And the way we see it is that the government ministers, we had this thing over here in Ireland called the Celtic Tiger, and a lot of people in the, let's just say, the golden circle of, for want of a better word, certain element in society spent a lot of money, got a lot of money from the banks, and squandered and bought and fed on this, this bubble that was growing and growing and growing, and all of a sudden in 2008 over here it burst, and hence we had to foot the bill to the bondholders. Now we class that as an odious debt. We shouldn't have been paid. We all know there was no contract, and the debt of the bondholders had nothing got to do with the actual sovereign debt of the country. So if you're saying that the too big to fail approach to the communication companies is going to be the same to the banks, then we're just going to be, if that report comes out and the ramifications are to affect all the wireless technology and the communications out there, and even the health benefits, because there's people out there using wireless devices to keep them alive. I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Mm-hmm. And
all that is going to be affected. And of course, they will just lump it on the government, which means the taxpayer is going to get hit again.
Mm-hmm. Now, let me also talk a little bit though about sort of, it isn't as bad into perpetuity as it may sound. And here's one reason why, is that we do have the capacity as human beings to adapt to our changing environment. We do have the ability to do that. That's why we're at the top of the food chain, so we can adapt. What has happened is that the explosion of wireless technology into our environment has outdistanced our ability to adapt in any reasonable time frame to it. So that one of the things that we are going to need to do is minimize exposure. We have to back away on exposure to give our bodies time to figure this out. There's always going to be 10% of the population that is not going to be able to adapt. And this is the same with allergies in the springtime and all of that. There's 10% of the population that won't adapt. Most of the population will be able to. We have to protect those people, though, who cannot adapt. Young kids, people who are electrosensitive. We have a growing problem around the world now.
Very big.
With people who are electrosensitive because they have not been able to adapt, but their bodies are never going to be able to adapt. And it is a very, very serious functional impairment. It is something that here in the United States we're able to help some people get disability for it. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we have figured out some ways to mitigate the symptoms, but it is a serious problem. So at the end of the day, if we are able to curtail some of these exposures, and by the way, when we say that the industry is too big to fail, the industry itself will survive, but it doesn't mean that when these lawsuits and these other findings come out there, that we are not going to be compelled to take steps to protect people. I think we will be compelled to take steps that will protect people. The government will get behind that, but the industry is going to get away with it.
Well, the industry will get away with it if the government allow them to get away with it. And the issue that we have, and I'm sure you guys have globally, what's at the moment with the uprising, and people are seeing what's going on and the corruption with the governments that are, what's going on, the backhanders, the padded envelopes and everything else, and the banks being bailed out, and, this mass austerity globally that's taken place. Now, it's up to the people to stop that from happening, and that means they have to wake up to what's going on and make the change and hold these companies accountable, because I'm pretty sure, and this is just my own opinion, and maybe Steve might jump in with me, I don't know, Steve, if you agree, but I'm pretty sure that these companies knew that this wireless technology, in whatever guise you put it, is dangerous. As you say, it goes back to the 90s, and they buried it for profit, to make money.
Well, see, and here's, you're absolutely correct. And in 1993, 1994, 1995, these very large wireless technology companies, carriers, as well as people who make cell phones, were filing for patents that were protective patents against the radiation. We have that as evidence. Those patents exist. So there's no question that the argument will be strong that the industry knew and they did not warn. But this is, if you think about it, just take the United States as an example, we have 350 million people using cell phones every day. 350 million people. If we have to compensate 350 million people because the industry did not warn, well, now you're talking about something that could bankrupt that industry, that wireless industry. And we can't afford to have that happen because of this too big to fail strategy that the industry has implemented over the past 20 years. So we do have this, unfortunate situation where, the industry will probably end up getting a slap on the hand, and what will be balanced is, quote, the good that the technology industry has brought, and that the government will take the hit in terms of, what should have been done and what wasn't done. And, I think that's the reality, based on my experience, that's what I see happening. Now, another part of this is that we have these two things that are working in parallel. Number one is the outrage that you rightly express about, backhanders and crooked dealings and too big to fail, and the industry is going to get away with it. And that's not the way our society should be behaving. That's political. But we also have the problem of people who are being harmed right now.
Yeah.
They're being harmed every day.
Yeah.
We have kids who have autism symptoms. We have people who are electrosensitive. And those things are going to have to be fixed on an individual basis. The political system in real time is not capable of moving quick enough to help those people. So we're back to the point of trying to get information to people that is not hysterical information. It's real information that allows them to be empowered to take steps to protect themselves and their families. So long as we're doing that, we're taking care of the immediate problem. And on another track, we have to take care of this bigger political problem. And many times what's happening is that groups are mixing the two of those things together. So what happens is you lose the political battle and you do nothing for the people who are harmed. So that what my hope is that more and more people will be able to separate the politics from the medical and public health issue and move simultaneously trying to solve the safety problem for individuals while we are all working on trying to solve the bigger societal problem, the political problem.
Well, we're definitely trying to do that at the moment. I'll just do a call out just to let our listeners know that if you have any questions for Dr. George, pop them in the chat room there, and we'll be able to pick them up and ask Dr. George. And if you want to phone in on 046 927 1212 and speak to Dr. George if you have a question. Steve, what's your take on all of this?
Well, again, based on research we've seen over the years and based on reports from Barry Thrower, and the fact that, say, DECT phones, Wi-Fi and microwave are three items that are no longer in use in my home. It's I don't know. I mean, it's an uphill battle because, as we know, the information has been doing the rounds for a long time, pretty much like the information in relation to the fluoride, and it's only now, 50 years later, that we're starting to kind of only through public pressure that they're kind of starting to look into that. So I mean, I wonder if this information has been around since the 90s, and we're now we're now 20 years on. Does that mean that we could be looking at possibly another 30 years before this is really put on a table somewhere and gets into mainstream for discussion?
Well, Steve, I hope not, and that's why this litigation that is now in its full-blown stages here in D.C. is so important. We didn't get, for example, with cigarette smoking, it took 50 years to get to this point of where the litigation is now. It took 50 years for cigarette smoke, for example. Fluoride has never had anything like this in terms of this type of multi-billion-dollar litigation. so that this litigation in D.C. is going to move the dial. And what I really hope happens is that it moves the dial in such a way as to force the industry and the government to take protective steps now. And, another side of this is that we have never ever in human history had an exposure so pervasive so fast. When you think about 6 billion people using a mobile phone every day and another 2 or 3 billion people using other types of wireless devices, we have never had it. These things didn't even exist 20 years ago. So that this is an unprecedented penetration of dangerous exposure into society. Governments are going to be compelled to act, especially after there is a legal precedent set. So I hope we're not waiting another 30 years. I hope that within the next year or two, the dial is going to be moved, and that would be good for everybody.
I hope so as well, Dr. George, because we've seen the research, we know what the research is saying. But as Alan mentioned earlier, that cell phones came into existence, and a few people used them, and then over the years, billions of people are using them, and now not only is it a phone, it's now your phone, it's your camera, it's your social networking site. It's become so many things, and it's now evolved into the tablet, also Wi-Fi, and then the laptop and the netbook and the iPad and everything now it's like as if there's a web being weaved, and every new device that comes into that web is based on the Wi-Fi technology. And if at some point in time the governments do come up and say, we got it wrong, and this kind of technology is dangerous, it can alter your DNA, it can alter your cell structure, it can do damage, it can cause cancer, you probably find that a lot of the population will kind of look at cancer and the damage that can be done. They probably go, well, that's like saying if I smoke I'm going to get cancer. There's a chance I won't, and this technology is so interwoven into people's lives. Maybe even if the information, the warnings was put out there, maybe a lot of the people would say, I'll take the chance because I couldn't do without my iPhone. I couldn't do without my iPad.
Well, look what, Dr. George, look what Barry Trower said in his latest report, that he said the next generation of females would be 57% of them will be sterile.
Yeah.
So this is a long-term effect. This is not like overnight. This is going to take a long term, and unfortunately with some people, until they're actually physically suffering or somebody they know is suffering, they just don't. It doesn't sink in.
Yeah, but look, even if people, you know as well as I do, there are people who smoke 10 cigarettes a day, there's people who smoke 60 cigarettes a day, and even the people who smoke 10 cigarettes a day, if they see the person who smokes 60 coughing up a lung and having cancer and walking around in some contraption or something, a nebulizer or whatever, they'll go, well, I'm all right because I only smoke 10 a day.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to this thing, they talk about the non-ionizing radiation, and they say safe levels. That's like saying, if you smoke 5 cigarettes a day rather than 50, you won't get cancer. Well, you mightn't get cancer as soon, it'll probably take you longer to get cancer, but you're guaranteed that if you're putting them kind of chemicals in your body, that something's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, look, there are no safe levels of exposure to these electromagnetic fields. Let's make that very clear. At low levels, we give your body a chance to figure it out, so that we have a fighting chance toward adaptation. But there are no levels that are absolutely safe, or no levels that do not cause some type of biological response. So that in that regard, when you're talking about fertility and conditions like autism and those, it is a real problem. And again, as I said earlier, the fact that there are so many different types of conditions that can arise from cell membrane damage and intracellular physiological change, DNA damage, problems with DNA repair, that it is such a wide array of different types of problems that it almost looks to the public like it's not there. It's like an elephant in the room. And that's why it's really important to I think, in my view, to be able to educate parents of young children so that the protection steps become part of what they are practicing themselves and teaching their children. I'm not saying that there's that we forget about the generation of millennials now who are the biggest users of this wireless technology, who have integrated that in, but they're also the most stubborn part of our society. They're the invincibles.
Yeah. Well, they
don't believe.
This is the problem. And one of the things I said when I approached parents about this technology, I said, if there's a gas leak in the school, you don't leave the kids in there and call the plumber. You get all the kids out of the school, you fix the gas leak, and then let them go back in. And my reasoning was that if Wi-Fi is dangerous or presumed to be dangerous, you switch it off until you have the facts, and when you have the facts, then you switch it back on.
Yeah.
But
and I have to say that the argument that's made for Wi-Fi in schools is really a very shallow argument, because the argument that's made is that this is the best way to get information to our kids, that comes from around the world. Well, if you look at Wi-Fi, it's like a squirt gun. If you look at fiber optic infrastructure, it's like a fire hose. You're talking about millions of times more data that you can transmit over fiber, either plastic fiber or glass fiber. And nowadays, there are ways of retrofitting schools with either plastic fiber or glass fiber that simply integrates into the existing wiring that's in the school. So that the argument that's being made that this is the best way to improve the education of our kids and to improve their education experience in the school is simply false. So there is a better way. And that's another thing that I believe that we really need to educate parents on, and others on, is that there's a better way. Wireless is not the best way for what we're touting wireless to do. There's a better way, and fiber optic is one better way.
Well, I don't know what the situation would be over here, because we are in Ireland and we are, we're not ahead of the times. But my solution was just to hardwire the equipment, until we, to say to them, look, hardwire the laptops, and then we'll work on sorting out what, both sides of what you believe regarding wireless. And, okay, I believe, Steve, you said there's a device that you can hook up the iPads that can be hardwired as well.
There is a small device, because my daughter, same as probably a lot of people's daughters and sons out there, my daughter got, I think it was after her, I don't know, her birthday or could have been Christmas, I'm not 100% sure, but she got a tablet, an Android tablet, and she got that around about the same time when I kind of woke up to the whole Wi-Fi thing. So I sat the family down and I explained to them about the dangers and said that I was going to limit the amount, that I wasn't going to shut it off altogether, but it was going to be off while no one was using it. And if somebody needed to use it, it would be put on and then it'd be switched off. And that kind of transpired over the months, weeks actually. It wasn't even months. But because it wasn't on all the time, they weren't using it, and then the tablet it wasn't really used much anymore. It was just gathering dust in a corner, because obviously without Wi-Fi it's kind of completely useless for a 12, 13-year-old. But what I've done in the end, I looked into it and found that there is a small device that you can get. It doesn't cost a lot. I think I got it for €24. And this device, it plugs into your Ethernet. You plug an Ethernet cable into it, and then there's a small USB 2 or USB 2B or whatever it's called connection on the other end, and that plugs happily into any tablet, and it works perfect. There's no issue. And actually, because you're working it then hardwired, it's even quicker.
Right.
So there are solutions out there. Unfortunately, you will get your people who when wireless first came out, as me being a techie, and Steve as being a techie as well, but for me working in the industry, when wireless first came out, I thought it was a godsend. It was manna from heaven. I thought, no more cables, we can use wireless. And then, when I found out about the dangers of wireless, my attitude soon changed. But at the end of the day, the safety of my family are more important than my efficiency or how fast I can do something, or the the fact that I might have to run a cable. My family are more important, and the health of my family are more important. And I'd like to think from the mums and dads who are listening in that they should be thinking the same thing. But they have this, and Steve has said a few times, this cognitive dissonance, which just stops them believing, the information. They have selective, they choose, very selective. They choose the information they want to hear, and the rest you put to one side. And for some reason, even though we know the governments lie and the politicians lie, they still don't believe that. Even, presenting the information from experts, for some reason, they just don't get it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's also, from a psychological point of view, if there's an alternative pathway, it's easier to accept that there's a danger. If you don't provide an alternative, like for example hardwiring in a school or in your home or with fiber or something like that, if you don't present that at the same time you're talking about the danger, what happens is that information is processed by the person who's listening as a dead end, and it becomes very stressful to even hear it. So what we've found is that it's very important to say, look, there is a better way, and there's a danger here, but there's a better way that we can go to avoid the danger. The two really need to be talked about hand in hand. So it's always important to have a solution in hand, so that you don't give parents a dead end, say, oh my God, one more thing that I can't control in my life, and I'm trying to control these kids getting to school. So that's another thing that we found. It's very, very important that if you're going to take on the question of Wi-Fi in the schools or the smart meter at the home or whatever, there has to be an alternative that is readily available, or that makes sense to the folks who you're talking to. Otherwise, they can't hear you. Because they don't have a way out. Yeah,
I agree. You have to. It's no problem giving them there's no issue giving them a problem, but make sure you have a solution as well to back it up. Right. That's what we try and do here on OYM. At the end of the show, we normally say, right, we have time to talk about solutions and what we can do about it, which is what we're going to do tonight as well. But Steve, you have a question that's come in.
No, actually, a link came in earlier from one of the listeners on the OYM chat room, Eric. So hi to Eric, and thanks for the link. The link Eric posted was one that I do remember hearing about this or something like this maybe a year ago, and it's one of these things. It goes in and it stays in your mind for a while, and then you just forget all about it because life gets in the way. And I think it's a great experiment for people to do, and especially for children, because I know when my kids, when they're in juniors, they often come home and they had to grow a seed. They had some cotton wool in a jar and they had to grow a seed. No, they had to grow, I think it was some grass or whatever it was, but it was on a seed, from a seed. But
grass?
Well, no, the kind you walk on, Alan. Okay. The grass you walk on. I don't know what.
That's some skill.
It's a very open-minded skill. Anyway, but these were. It's a school in Denmark, and there was 5 ninth grade students, and what they did was they'd done a science experiment with some cress, some watercress. They grew some cress. The same scenario: a little petri dish or a petri dish or a saucer, I don't know, and they put some cotton wool with some water and some cress seeds, and they put one of them beside a router, a Wi-Fi router. And sorry, just to backtrack a little bit, the reason they undertook this experiment, according to what it says on the website here, was that some of the girls had difficulty concentrating in school the next day, and they were kind of attributing that to the fact that they slept with their cell phone very close to them at night. So anyway, they had this idea. They'd done the experiment, and I think they got a check for 1,000 kroner. I don't know what that equates to in euro or dollars, but they'd done the cress seeds beside the router and cress seeds in another room away from Wi-Fi signals. And what they found in their experiment was, and there's 2 pictures here to back it up, and I've posted the link in the chat room, and I will do so again, but the 2 pictures, one shows cress growing, flourishing in a dish, and the second one shows dead seeds. And they're saying that the cress that was in another room where it wasn't affected by any of the Wi-Fi grew and flourished, but yet the other seeds that were placed next to the Wi-Fi router, they all died. Not one of them grew. I think that would be a great little experiment. That would be the kind of experiment that you could, when we're telling adults about this, the dangers of it, maybe we should just suggest that as a small experiment. Grow a couple of seeds, grow some beside your router, and grow some in another area of the home.
No, I think it'd be better to actually bring it in and show them. Because if you say, we suggest you do this, chances are they won't do it. So,
yeah, you're probably right.
You know what it's like with some people. So what you do is bring in both of them and say, this is what I've done, and this is the experiment, and this is the result.
Could you imagine doing that in the workplace as well? Going into your workplace and saying, okay, like where I work, there's two Wi-Fi routers in the office where the women sit. Imagine going in and just doing that experiment there and saying, I'm going to grow this one here, and I'm going to grow this one way out here at the back of the building where there's no Wi-Fi.
And do it.
Yeah.
It's a good experiment. It'd be a good experiment to do just to test it. So there's so much that we have to try and get across. What would you say, Dr. George, to mums and dads who are listening in now and who are sitting on the fence and not too sure? What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing is that, there are some of us who, have, sometimes by choice and sometimes not, have made a career of studying this phenomenon. And there's a great deal of science that points in the direction of there being dangers that need to be mitigated. As an example, in my library, my scientific paper library, there are some 20,000 papers that are relevant to this issue of health effects from wireless. And to put that in context, if you spent 15 minutes on one paper and you worked 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, it would take you somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 years to just read the papers.
Yeah.
So that it's important to understand that there are experts who dedicate their life's work to figuring this out. And that the vast majority of these experts, and myself included, we know that there are health risks here. We know that young children are at greater risk. Young children, as my friend in Sweden, Ali Johansson, says all the time, children are not little adults. Children are different. Their bodies are different. Their cells are differentiating. There's a lot of reasons why we have to protect our kids. And so that the first thing we need to do is really look at this question of Wi-Fi in schools and Wi-Fi in the home. There are easy alternatives. There are better ways. Simply wire the computers. Make sure that you have wired phones. And just doing that would make a big difference to the lives of your children. So start there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what upsets me is the fact that it could be 5 or 10 years time down the line that these kids are now probably in their late, say 18, 19, 20, 21, and probably a bit, in the 20s, in the early 20s, and they might want to settle down and have a family, and they find out that they're sterile and they can't have kids, and it was due to something that they were using 10 years ago. And we have the parents who will probably just won't understand it, or they'll feel that they were to blame because they never listened, that they just wouldn't listen, they just wouldn't go and check out the information. Not that they had to believe. We're not saying that for people to believe what we're saying. What we're saying is go and check out the facts, go and check out the information, look at the other side, just don't believe the government. And it's them parents 10 years down the line who will be, consoling their daughters and maybe their sons to say, well, I'm sorry, but, you're sterile and you can't have kids, and it's because of technology that I brought into the house. There was somebody there 10 years ago telling us the danger of it, and we just ignored them.
Yeah. I would like them to believe us because we're right. I mean, we know what we're doing here. So I would like them to believe us. But the most important thing is believe that there is a better way. There is a better way. You don't need to roll the dice take a chance with the lives of your kids. You don't need to do that. And that's, I think, the most powerful argument, that parents can do the right thing here, and it doesn't disrupt their life, it doesn't disrupt their household, it doesn't disrupt the school. So those are the things that I think are most important. And yes, do believe us, because we are correct.
Okay, Steve, you have a question for Dr. George.
Yeah, well, I think you kind of touched on it there, but one of the questions that came in was worst case scenario concerning classrooms, universities, etc. With the Wi-Fi generation now, the current batch of say 16 to 25-year-olds, what health issues can they expect to counter in the next 5 to 10 years, Dr. George?
Well, the first thing to keep in mind is this, is that from about the age of 8 or 9 up to about the age of 20, the cells in our bodies are differentiating, meaning they're changing more than they're proliferating or growing. So that when cells are changed, that's why we look different at age 12, and then we go through puberty maybe, and we have our voice changes at 14, and we start shaving and all of this, and then the same thing happens with girls. So that's differentiation. And when there's differentiation, there's exposed DNA. And when there's exposed DNA, that DNA is vulnerable to the effects of these electromagnetic fields, these information-carrying radio waves. So the types of things that they might expect to encounter are very broad. They can involve, rather straightforward things like infertility, those types of things. But you also have other conditions like blood disorders, immune system deficiencies, things like very severe acne on their face. There are a whole range of symptoms, and that's why it's so important that in those years where differentiation is predominant, up to about age 20 and 21, we really need to mitigate exposure. We really need to lower exposure. Now, for example, with the cell phones, kids are going to have cell phones, but they can use a headset. They can use a wired headset so that they move the cell phone away from their body. The thing about cell phones that is most important is that the plume of radiation, of the information-carrying radio wave that has the highest intensity, is about 6 or 8 inches from the phone itself. So that if you're able to use a wired headset and move the phone away from you, there is not as much penetration into your body. So you lessen the different tissues, the amount of tissues that are exposed. And that helps a great deal. So there are things that young people can do and that us older people can do to mitigate or to lessen exposure. And that helps, because if we lessen the exposure, it gives our bodies a chance to adapt.
Definitely. And I think there's been a lot of cases where men especially, where they keep the phone in their front pocket or their back pocket, and you end up getting a testicular cancer and various other things.
And what about women as well? You see women going around with the phone in their bra.
Yeah, they put the phone in the bra just to store it there, and then they end up getting breast cancer.
Yeah, and there are also several studies now that show that pregnant women who have high amounts of cell phone use, there are developmental and cognitive deficits in their children that do not show up until they're 9 or 10 years old.
Would you put that down to something like ADHD or something like that?
Well, you have that same mechanism is probably involved with ADHD, autism, those types of things. Similar mechanism, not exactly the same, but similar. But this developmental and cognitive deficit, that means that the exposure in utero is impacting the ability to function 10 years later. And that's pretty profound. It's the kind of thing that we have had with, for example, drinking during pregnancy leading to fetal alcohol syndrome. And there are other examples like that. So you're talking about a serious environmental toxin, these information-carrying radio waves. And by the way, the reason I distinguish information-carrying radio waves from other radio waves is that the biological response is most profound when there is information on the radio signal that causes a chaotic type of modulation, a secondary wave that's chaotic. So that's why when there's information being carried, you have a more potent impact in terms of the adverse response than if it's simply a carrier wave or a microwave coming from a microwave oven or a non-information carrying electromagnetic field.
Although the microwaves from a microwave oven have their own range of problems as well regarding food and destroying apparently the DNA and a host of other things.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the microwave food is restructured to a point where the vast high percentage of the nutritional value is lost.
Yeah. Steve, you have a question?
Yeah, Dr. George, another question in from Eric on the chat there. Eric's wondering, are you familiar with a lady called Rebecca? I think it's Azen or it's Azen. Seemingly she was a library director, and she actually resigned from her job because of Wi-Fi. She felt that she shouldn't be have to be working in a place where she's bombarded with all these signals just in order to secure employment. So she resigned. Have you heard of her or that story?
No, I have not. Okay. Is she in Ireland there?
I'm guessing by the surname, no, and the phone number as well. I'll actually the link to this document. I'm gonna just pop it over to you so you can check it out anyway. But see me, I'm guessing she's in the US of A, and this article is going back to 2007.
Well, this is the thing. If you go into a job and the trouble is we've had people on the show with hyper electric sensitivity. Now that's a condition that's recognised in Sweden, and they moved them out. And the ladies who were on the show were going through some unbelievable conditions and just what they had to do to get away from it. And obviously our government is rolling out the 4G network, which is even going to be worse for them, even though it's recognised as a condition in Sweden. So, for people who suffer from that, what do you suggest to them?
Well, the first thing is that we do have some protocols, some intervention protocols that we're finding are very effective in mitigating the symptoms and stopping the symptoms. And, I can give you, one of our websites where we address this is it's a website called secretsofchampions.org.
Okay.
Secretsofchampions.org, and the platform area is healthy living. So secretsofchampions.org, healthy living platform. We're able to help people with those protocols, and that's the first thing. Is that what we're finding is that what happens is that with these electrohypersensitivity conditions, symptoms, that their physiology is completely disrupted. The entire body is out of whack. So the first thing we need to do is help people get their metabolism back in order and get their physiology back in order as a first step. And we do that by timing nutrition and helping people manage their sleep cycles. And that we have certain protocols to do that. So if we get their metabolism balanced and their physiology back on track, and then get them to be able to sleep properly, now we have a chance to start changing the cell membrane damage. And again, the challenge here is that these conditions have taken a very, very long time to develop. So it does take quite a bit of time to reverse the conditions. By the way, here's an interesting fact about electrohypersensitivity. is that in the vast majority of cases, the electrohypersensitivity was not actually caused by electromagnetic fields. The underlying pathology is a combination of a whole bunch of stressors, including electromagnetic fields. But the electromagnetic fields are triggers of the symptoms, so that you have this underlying condition that, we did a study, for example, in the UK a few years ago, about 350 or 400 people, I don't remember the number, of people with electrohypersensitivity. In almost all of them, there was a precipitating event before the symptoms became obvious, and they ranged from being struck by lightning to being bitten by a spider to having a marital divorce. There was always a precipitating event that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and then they have full-blown electrohypersensitivity. So sort of an interesting thing that in most cases, the electromagnetic field exposure is a contributing cause, but not the main cause. But it does become the main cause of the symptoms.
That is interesting, because some of the people, as I say, the ladies that came on, we talked, had worked in environments where there was this equipment around them at one stage, and they didn't suffer from it, and then all of a sudden they start getting sensitive to it. So, right. I mean, that's interesting to say that it's a symptom, because it was obviously it triggers the condition.
It triggers the condition, but the underlying pathology, the cell membrane pathology, is a cumulative thing that takes many, many cell turnover cycles. And like I said, in almost all cases, there is a precipitating event that, like an illness, like having a pneumonia, for example. So that there's a straw that breaks the camel's back, and then all of a sudden it's full-blown electrosensitivity.
So maybe these ladies need to look back at something that happened before and after, and just kind of track back to see how trivial it doesn't matter how trivial. Track back to see what happened at that time in their lives, to see, was that the trigger?
Was that the trigger? And the thing is, of course, that would be useful from an information point of view. But the difficulty is that right now they have a real problem.
Yeah.
They have a real serious medical problem that it really doesn't matter how they got there. They have to deal with it now. They have to figure out a way to control those symptoms.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to do with our protocols, is help them today so that they can get back functioning. And then, as they go forward, they can look back and try to figure out, what the pathway was to get into this situation. But the most important thing is to help them get out of it, so they can go back to being a mom and going to work and doing all of that.
Definitely, and I think they would appreciate that. Now, before we let you go, we have about 10 minutes left, but and we're going to focus on the positives. But before we let you go, we're going to get all your websites and everything else off you, and anything that you can help give out to our listeners so they can benefit from. But in the last 10 minutes, let's just look at solutions. Let's look at the good news and what we can do and what's going on.
Okay. Well, the first thing, of course, is to try to mitigate the exposures, to try to lessen the exposures. And we've already talked about some of those things. Using a headset if you're going to use a cell phone. Try to hardwire your phones in the house. Try to hardwire your computer networks, all of those things. They make a big, big difference. Now, there are also a number of other environmental mitigations that come out of the world of biobiology and some of these other places where there are actually energetic, technologies that help to restructure some of these electromagnetic fields within an environment. There's a group over in Germany called Gabriel Technology that has really good technology for this, and there are others. But the point is that there are some energetic technologies that are environmental mitigations that can help lessen the adverse effects. Do they solve the problem completely? No. Does it mean if you have one of these technologies you can use a cell phone without any problems or anything like that? No. But in the context of creating a better harmony in the environment, especially your sleep environment. These types of things are very, very valuable. I think that it's important for people to not underestimate the importance of their nutrition and managing their sleep. Because when your nutrition is out of whack and you're not sleeping, your body is not able to compensate for not only electromagnetic fields in the environment, but any other challenges that you have in the environment, whether it's at work, whether it's at play, whether it is just in your general environment. So nutrition and sleep are critically important. It's, of course, we all know that. Our moms told us about that, all of that. But it is probably one of the most important things that people take. They don't think enough about. So nutrition and sleep.
Excellent. Well,
One other thing I want to mention is that the biggest way of enhancing our ability to adapt is to have high percentages of lean muscle mass in our bodies, so that working out with weights and those types of things that increase the amount of lean muscle mass give us more energy stores that are able to help us adapt. So nutrition, specific types of exercise, and watching your sleep are critically important.
Yeah, definitely, big time. And the trouble is, sometimes this technology disrupts your sleep, but that's something that you have to deal with. Okay, we have one more question before we wrap up. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Dr. George, Lee was commenting on the People's Internet Radio chat there earlier, and he did ask a couple of questions, and he wanted to know, with the rollout of, say, like the 4G networks, and then the 5G, 6G, and so on and so forth, with every upgrade to this kind of system, is each upgrade going to be creating more harm to mankind? And if so, how much of an increase do you reckon would each upgrade?
Well, I don't know that it's going to be an incremental upgrade as far as the amount of adverse effects. Every time you introduce another generation, 4G, 5G, 6G, it is another challenge that has to be adapted to, because the technology changes, the form of the waves change. It is, by the way, the form of the waves that trigger the biological response. So it's like we're going to still be treading. We're going to be treading water, and when you bring in now another type of another generation of signal, those people who had adapted to the 4G, now they have to adapt to the 5G. So, I'm not so sure that it's going to be, piling risk on top of risk, but it certainly makes it much more difficult for the population to adjust.
So I'm guessing then, just as your body is maybe possibly adjusting to 4G, then it's subjected to 5G, so that the process just goes on and on. But
it just goes on and on.
One last question, and this is kind of for myself as well. This is something that we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, and I try and do it as much as possible. I know other people are doing it, and this is I just wonder what your thoughts are on grounding. I know, like, you were saying about the sleep and the proper nutrition and all, and that's good, but have you heard of the process of grounding, i.e. just, say, walking about in the park barefoot just to be grounded, I suppose?
Yes, absolutely. All of those things help. And, in terms of helping you with your sleep, in terms of helping, reduce your stress levels, and even, altering the positioning of your bed so that your head is at magnetic north, where you sleep. It's at magnetic north and your feet are at magnetic south, for example. Those types of things make a difference, but it doesn't mitigate the entire problem. So what you want to do is as many of those healthful things as possible: grounding, harmonizing the environment that you're in, readjusting your bed to magnetic north, taking care of your nutrition, making sure you get exercise. All of those things give you a better chance to adapt.
They all add up. All these little things, all the changes. And we have been saying this a lot on the radio show and having doctors come in and experts come on. saying about how important it is to your health. I mean, as we say, we know it's a cliche, but your body is your temple. What you put in is what you're going to get out. And we've had a number of people like Dr. Lorraine Day, like Dr. Terry Wallace on, who have cured themselves of various symptoms purely by changing their lifestyle, changing their diet, and eating the proper food. And I think that's, as you say, it's all part and parcel of being aware of this. Now, I've just sent an email over. We had one of the ladies who was on the show called Cara, and she's just sent an email in saying about, obviously, what would you recommend? I've sent over the Secrets for Champions.org website, and I've sent her over that to have a look at. But what we're going to do, we're just at that time there where we have to finish up, but I'd just like to say a big, big thank you, Dr. George, for coming on the show and giving us the information and just helping, educate people and giving them the knowledge and the choice. It's up to them now. Now they have the information to go off and do more research and check it out. So a big thank you from myself for, giving us that information.
Okay, it was my pleasure to visit with you, and maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely. Well, listen, I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your details and all your websites, and then, do the promotion there and get the information out there. So over to you, Steve.
Yeah, Dr. George, I want to echo what Alan has said. I mean, the information, it's absolutely been fantastic. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who have learned from it anyway. I know, as always, we don't know everything, so we will pick up little bits and pieces of good information along the way. And all the chat rooms that we monitor, the PIR and the OYM chat room, there's a lot of positive comments on there as well. So people do appreciate you coming on and sharing the information. But just before we do cut to a quick break, can you just give us your website again where people can get more information on your work and what you do?
Okay, the first one is secretsofchampions.org. Secrets, plural, of champions.org. And the Healthy Living platform is the place to go. There are several different platforms on there. So secretsofchampions.org. We have another website called Health, HEALTH, Vox, VOX, healthvox.com. That's a store. And actually, there's a really good book on there, 2 books on there called Hold the Phone and Hold the Phone, Here's Why, that I would recommend to everyone in terms of getting a nice snapshot of where the state of the science is now and what your mitigation steps can be. I actually am remiss in not mentioning that before, because this book, Hold the Phone, by Alison Wilson, who's a professional bowel biologist down in Australia, is, I believe, one of the most helpful books ever written on the subject. And folks can purchase that at health-vox.com, healthvox.com. And we have another website where we have our ongoing research, and that is www.sppionline.org. That's our Science and Public Policy Institute online, sppionline.org. So those are our 3 main websites. And again, if people have specific questions, if you don't mind, Steve, you can send them to me individually, and I'll be happy to answer people personally.
That's very nice of you.
You can't get any better than that.
Yeah, that's very nice of you to do that. Thank you. And just quickly to just repeat, for people who suffer from hyperelectric sensitivity, which website would be the best for them? Is it secretsofchampions.org?
I would say that a combination of the secretsofchampions.org or the HealthVox. The first thing I would recommend to people is to go to healthvox.com, and download a copy of the Hold the Phone book, because it really is a very good resource with quotes from experts and whatever. And then, as far as having some intervention, the secretsofchampions.org is the one place to go. And then, as I have said, for those who are listeners to your show, if you can send me any individual questions, I'll be happy to go back and get in touch with them personally, and maybe we can customize something for them, because the idea is we want to help folks however we can.
That's brilliant, and that's much appreciated. That's going to be a big help to a number of people that listen to this show who suffer from that. So we'll definitely sort something out. Okay, Dr. George, just stay with us there. We're going to go over to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
And we're back. That was a very, very short version. I Want to Break Free of Queen. I just thought that was an apt little song because we want to break free of this Wi-Fi.
Exactly. Now, Chris, who's normally on the chat facility, he's away in Donegal doing what he does up in Donegal, and there's no Wi-Fi and there's no internet or anything. So he just said can we give a message to the people on the chat room he apologises for not being here and say hello to Snowy, apparently, something like that.
Yeah, he's playing it safe.
He said something about don't let somebody pick on Snowy.
Yeah, no. What he actually said was, he was up in Donegal. He'd catch us on the pod, and a big hi to everyone, all his mates and buddies on the chat room. And he sent a warning out to Agent. He says, Agent, get your hands off Snowy. I will be back.
That's brilliant.
So there you go.
That was a brilliant interview, very enjoyable with Dr. George Carlo, who's gonna, we've asked him to come back in a few months' time when that report is released, and we'll find out what the findings are and whether they agree that wireless technology over 300 megahertz is actually dangerous, and which we know it is, and he said it is. They know that. They just have to get the court ruling for it, and then that can be rolled out across the world, and hopefully we can stop all this from happening. Fingers crossed. That's the plan of attack anyway. Now, next week, we have, I have to confirm next week with the guest, but it's a chap called Piers Corbin, and he's from a website called Weather Action, and apparently their predictions are spot on, and some other outside weather agencies actually go to them and see what they're doing, and get the information off them. So it sounds very interesting. I did have a quick chat with Piers about 2 weeks ago, so I'll give him a ring during the week and confirm that he's going to be on for next week. And we'll get him on because with all this apparently global warming, we know it's not, it's more global cooling that's going on. We'd like to get some kind of definitive answers from somebody who's in the know. And, why don't we get somebody on who's actually an expert in that field?
And I think it's about time we did, because only last week my son came home from school and he had, the way kids come home from school and there's notes in the bag. The little note in his thing was about they're doing a kind of a Green Schools Committee, and they were talking about the Green Schools Committee and this thing, and what they're encouraging the kids to do. The kids have to go around the classrooms and make sure all the whiteboards are switched off and stuff like that, because we're trying to reduce the carbon footprint. And it went in to say on the little flyer, because as we know, and I love the way it's put, as we know, because then if you read it, if you didn't know, or if you disagree with it, you kind of feel, I'm in the minority now because everyone else seems to know. But as we know, burning fossil fuel has a detrimental effect on the atmosphere and is directly linked to global warming.
Right. Okay.
It wasn't that's not a kind of verbatim. It was words that kind of meant that. I just wanted to spice it up.
Well, let's find out. Let's get a weather expert on and see what he says. I think that's the best idea and the best thing to do is to get somebody on. So there you go. We're going to have another week. We're going to see what happens during the week, and again, we'll catch up next week. As I say, a big disappointment with the Dr. Courtney Brown. Thanks for John for ringing in last week and letting us know about it. I mean, it was great that he did, and we had a look at it. Just disappointing with the information, and then the marketing with, go and buy the DVD and what have you.
So what we're going to do is we're going to put something up there. A counter for 7 days. So in 7 days' time, when you come along to listen in to our show, we're going to have a book or a DVD for you to buy. Yeah, we'll sort something out. But if there's any links that you come across or any information that you come across during the week, by all means, email them into us. We probably won't send out all links because we get quite a few in, but we kind of pick and choose and then stick them in the actual for registered users anyway. We stick them in the list and then send them out to people. And if there's any other news, now very quickly, we are looking for a doctor. It has to be a medical doctor
who understands the benefits of cannabis. Now, I'm not looking really for a pro-doctor or an anti-doctor. I'm looking for a doctor who can honestly give us the science of cannabis. And we put an email out there to registered users and said, if anybody knows of the doctor, then send us an email, let us know, and we'll track them down and get them on, because there seems to be two sides of the camp. One side, we know about the benefits of cannabis, Ricky Simpson and everything else, and then the other side, they talk about cannabis being addictive. And I'm not saying it isn't, but we'd like to get a definitive answer with doctors and find out where we stand exactly with cannabis. Because we know it has benefits with the THC, but also there's people out there who are concerned that we're promoting a drug and it's addictive and it can have personality consequences, especially if you're a teenager and you start taking it. And obviously we want to take this seriously. We want to make sure that the information we put out there is as accurate as it can be. And we don't want to be irresponsible. So if you do know of a doctor or come across anyone who's in that field, it has to be a medical doctor. There's no point getting a health practitioner or anybody like that. It has to be a medical doctor, because it's only a medical doctor that, let's say, the sheeple will understand and maybe accept. So if you do come across anybody, or you know anybody, send us an email and let us know. Yeah, drug dealers see the benefits of drugs too. Yes, they do indeed.
Yeah, but from what we've seen, some of the stuff that you can buy, that people think they're buying, quality cannabis, and I'm not saying for smoking it. Again, we're all about the benefits of the plant and not just smoking it and getting high. I mean, any idiot can do that.
Yeah.
We're talking about the benefits. But from what we've heard, that if this was put on the table, then maybe plants that are out there will be good quality plants. Because I know some people when they're buying the cannabis, they're buying it in the form of maybe hash, and it's mixed with so many other things, and it's you don't know what you're using or what you're taking. So I think it needs to, it's about time it comes out. It needs to come out in the open. I know that in some states in the US of A, as we said about, it was either last week or the week before, they have kind of decriminalised it. Haven't legalised it, but they've decriminalised it. I think it's a step in the right direction. It's obviously going to be a long road, but I think if we can get a doctor on, someone who has medical expertise, and can shed some light on the benefits, that would be great.
I know they made it illegal, but people can still get it. So the fact that they made it illegal and there's a law there is not working, because people can still get it. So, but it's something that we want to try and do and put peace of mind to some people that have questions over it, and because they don't like the fact that, technically for some people it's a drug, and if you're talking about the benefits of cannabis, we're promoting it. Now, from my point of view, I'm more interested in the medical side and the benefits medically. I'm not really bothered about the smoking part, just the actual medical benefits of helping people. That's what we're interested in. But there you go. So at that time, we're going to hand over to People's Internet Radio on the show tonight. Let's see. I'm just checking to see who's on the show tonight, and Vin will be live on People's Internet Radio tomorrow night at 9 p.m. That's tonight. So Vin will be live. According to this, Vin will be live at 9 o'clock after us. So there you go. So passing off to Vin on People's Radio. Right, okay, take care. Have a good weekend. Stay safe. Any news, let us know. We'll catch you again. This is Alan James saying good night. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, 9 o'clock. I'm going to do the handover. For myself, Stephen George, have a great one, and we'll do it all again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.
Open your mind.